A former soldier who was discharged from the army with a brain tumour has been told he and his family aren't entitled to a council home, even though they can't afford to rent privately. The Streets family from Falmouth say they're paying the price for being honest. Well, tonight Cornwall Council says it's reviewing the case. Eleanor Parkinson has this report.
Yeah, is that your daddy?
Yeah, my daddy.
Yeah.
Charmaine Streets is very proud of her husband, James. He spent 15 years with the Household Cavalry and saw active service in Afghanistan and Kosovo. But in 2007, their fortunes changed. James Streets was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and despite treatment, he was medically discharged from the army. Since then, they've tried to build a new life. They took on a rented house in Falmouth, but because of his medical condition, the former soldier struggled to find a job.
He's applied for many jobs, and some he's heard back from, some he hasn't heard back from. But like I say, he's on medication now for seizures for the rest of his life, so that also affects him in trying to get some work. Obviously, the money we'd used on the private rent in the hope that obviously Jamie would find work. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So the money was dwindling very low, and yes, we couldn't afford to stay there. We could not afford to renew the contract, knowing that the landlady couldn't accept anybody that would later on be taking benefits.
Cornwall Council gave them emergency accommodation, but they've now been told they have to move out as they're not entitled to council accommodation.
So why is it the Streets have been told that they're not entitled to council accommodation? Well, the council says because they left their private rented accommodation voluntarily, they made themselves intentionally homeless, and because of that, they can't be put on the housing register.
Cornwall Council say a review into their case is now being carried out. They say their policy does take into account provision relating to veterans from the armed forces. But they also say, to be fair to others, they have to apply strict criteria as set out in housing legislation. James Streets couldn't take part in this interview because today he was sitting an exam in plumbing in his quest to find a job. His wife says her husband has served his country well. She says they now need a little help in return. Eleanor Parkinson, BBC Spotlight, Falmouth.
Well, earlier I spoke to David Woods from the charity Homes for Heroes and I asked him how widespread is this problem.
Yeah, this seems to be a national problem at the moment. I cover a lot of areas with UK Homes for Heroes, and I'm coming across these very similar problems to the Street family all over the UK.
You've been working with the Streets family, I think, haven't you? What's your opinion of the way their case has been handled?
Yeah, their case is, it's a very difficult situation that they find themselves in. I think there's extenuating circumstances that should have been looked at before the council originally made their decision with regards to them making themselves intentionally homeless. That's certainly not the case. It was a case of, you know, they found themselves in a difficult position, and the council should certainly have looked at it a lot more sympathetically than what they have done.
And what seems to be the issue here? There's a military covenant, isn't there, that local authorities should be aware of?
There is. Basically, the military covenant exists to give further help to ex-forces, you know, or people who are leaving the forces. And unfortunately, a lot of local authorities are not adhering to the military covenant, and it seems to be a national problem. And I think it's now time that central government actually step in and start fining the local authorities who are not adhering to the military covenant.
It's going to put more financial pressure, though, on our local authorities, isn't it?
Yes, I understand the financial element of it. I understand that George Osborne has recently spoken up about this case. But what people seem to forget is that recently the government have released £40 million from the LIBOR fund to help this situation with homeless veterans or veterans who are coming out of the forces who need to find accommodation for themselves. And, you know, if the money has been shared out, then the money should be getting spent on building these types of accommodation that's needed for our ex-forces.
OK, David Woods, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.